If you remove a large pool of men who don't have college degrees, and that is your only marker, understanding every race of men out earns their female counterpart, then you are doing yourself a disservice. I understand it, but it's not logical when you are trying to find a husband, especially if you are trying to find a husband who makes more than you. Became a lopsided numbers game. And you're like, man, why does this guy, what does he know about dating? And he's going to explain it in this lecture. But again, guys, stay with the video, okay? Because of course it's going to lean towards the women at first, but then you'll start to see it coming to a conclusion to where he subtly explains to women certain things that we say in these spaces, but the way he explains it to this audience was absolutely genius.
The first question that usually comes up is something like this. How the heck did a married 46-year-old financial writer for Fortune magazine, somebody who normally writes about oil and gas or the stock market, how the heck did I end up writing a book about dating? So here's the story. The staffs at Money and Fortune, my last two employers, were disproportionately women. Over time, I couldn't help but notice that most of the men were married, like me, whereas most of the women were single, many of them unhappily single.
Y'all missed that. Just like I said on these panel shows.
Notice that most of the men were married, like me, whereas most of the women were single, many of them unhappily single.
Did you hear that? Where he worked, most of the men were married, most of the women were single. This is the exact same thing that we see on social media. That's why men spend more time on their platforms talking to women, or they'll invite women who are single on their platform so they can have these discussions to see where their mind is at. And that's one thing I think women who have a disdain for black men, I don't think you guys understand how lenient and how egalitarian black men are. And I'm gonna give you a perfect example on this. On panel shows, when it's ran by a black man, he will typically invite all walks of black women. Some married, the majority of them not married, and a lot of those not married women, they don't like black men, okay? But as a black man, we continue to invite those women on there to try and have a conversation with them. The inverse is the complete opposite. You will never see a black man who has a disdain for black women on a black woman's post or panel show talking about his issues with black women. And I think black women take that for granted. I was like, man, you see black men will open up their panels to y'all, even though you have a heavy disdain for black men. In reality, we shouldn't be effing with y'all. But black men, we love black women so much, we like, well, shit, let me just go ahead and let her cook. That's crazy, right? Have y'all ever noticed that?
And a lot of my female friends had these dating histories, these dating stories that just didn't make any sense to me. They would go out with guys who would never call them back, or they had boyfriends who cheated on them unapologetically, or some of them claimed never to get asked out on dates at all. And I have one friend from college, a woman who is literally the most attractive person I'm friends with, who can, and she confided in me before, as I was writing the book, that she had not been asked out on a date in 6 months. So as I said, none of this made any sense to me. But at first, I figured this was some kind of a fluke unique to my own circle of friends. I think that the tipping point was a lunch I had with my friend Sarah. Sarah had been dating the same guy for a long time. And while Sarah and I are more work friends than personal friends, it certainly seemed like she and her boyfriend Matt were well on their way to getting married. So before our drinks arrived, I asked Sarah about Matt casually, and her expression basically crumpled. She sighed and told me that she and Matt had just broken up. Matt had informed her that he just wasn't quite ready to settle down. See, here's the thing. Matt, he's 45 years old.
So what you think going on with Matt? Matt probably got options out there. It's not the same for men and women. Matt, 45 years old, said he's not ready to settle down. He has a good job. She liked him, so he like, I'm not ready to settle down. Men can do that, but it's a little bit different for women. Fair use.
He and Sarah had been dating for 3 years. Sarah was 38 years old at the time, and everyone knew that she wanted to get married and have kids. So for Matt to basically...
At 30, so when they got together, she was 35, and now she's 38, man.
Run out her clock to let the relationship drag on for almost 3 years without intending to marry Sarah, it just all seemed kind of cruel. Months later, I shared Sarah's story with Maria Avgatidas, who is a Manhattan matchmaker and dating coach. Maria told me she'd heard some version of this story so often that she'd come up with a moniker for the men. She calls them time thieves. And the key thing you need to know about my friend Sarah is that she literally has everything going for her. She's kind, she's funny, she's very good company. She's an Ivy Leaguer who looks like a cable news anchor. Given the amount of time Sarah spends at the gym, I bet you anything she's more fit at 38 than she was at 28. Frankly, I just couldn't figure out why Sarah would have any difficulty convincing Matt that it was time to get married.
So real quick, and we all have friends, right? I said this on Monday. Do you think you get the same version of your friend as your friend is in a relationship? Like even for the men, for both men and women, do you think they're the same, like the same person? You don't know that. I don't know that. So of course she's going to give you the edited version of herself. Yeah, I'm doing everything perfect. Or even a man, I'm doing everything right. But the funny thing is, men, we will call each other out. We may joke a little bit, be like, man, you wrong. You know what I'm saying? Some shit like that. But we're not getting the same person, as a friend when they're in a relationship. And I think that's what messes a lot of people up. We are completely different people when we are in a romantic relationship with somebody as opposed to just being a friend to somebody. Does that make sense? So yeah, I get it. You like your friend, but if she's telling you, yeah, I'm doing everything right, the crux of the situation is that you haven't heard from him. What did he do? Or what did she do? And he would only be the one to tell you that. What does she do in a relationship? Or what does he do in a relationship? And I think that's a huge flaw, especially on social media when we try and paint, only show the good parts of ourselves, Fair use.
So that's basically how I came up with the idea for the book. I wanted to find out why dating was so difficult for women like Sarah, and also why men like Matt seem to have so many options. Now,
there it is, options.
I must admit that my theory going into all this was different from where I ended up. Initially, I assumed that this shortage of college-educated men was a phenomenon unique to a handful of big cities like Washington or New York or London or Toronto or LA. I figured there was something about the job markets in these very cosmopolitan cities that attracted disproportionate numbers of women. Well, it turned out that the problem that I call the man deficit is not a big city problem. It's not, or not just a big city problem. It's a nationwide problem. In the US, there are now 5.5 million college-educated women who are aged 22 to 29 versus 4.1 million college-educated men in the same age bracket.
All right. So again, this lecture was, I want to say, almost 10, 11 years ago, but the numbers are still around the same. It's not as pronounced as it was back then, but the numbers are still the same. We all know that women have more degrees than men. So this is another conversation that's in the Black community, which led me to put together the comparisons between Black men and Black women. We know now that for every 100 Black men, there's 106 Black women. And in China, I think around this time, it was even more pronounced. I think it was like 55 more women than men in a particular education bracket. I have some notes here and so we'll go over them. But yeah, I just want to put things into context. It still rings true, but may not be as pronounced. Okay.
Now, pause for a moment and let those, I think you're already pausing for, let those numbers sink in. According to the U.S. Census Bureau's American Community Survey, among college grads in their 20s, there are now 5.5 million women versus 4.1 million men. That's 33% more women than men. That's 4 women for every 3 men. And what I found most interesting about the dating math is it's actually worse in rural states. Montana has 52% more college grad women than men among millennials. In Arkansas, it's 49% more female college grads. That compares to 34% more women than men in Washington, D.C. among young college grads, 30% in New York State, and 20% in California. As daunting as this 4-to-3 ratio may be for women, the actual dating math is even worse.
So he's building the case. The women are laughing, thinking that they're at a deficit, but listen to how he does this. This is good.
Yeah. Mathematically, dating is a bit like the game musical chairs. And if you ever played musical chairs as a kid, you probably recall that in the very first round of musical chairs, it's almost impossible to lose.
In the very first round, let's make some comparisons and parallels here. When he's talking about musical chairs, he said in the first round. In the dating market, that will be when you're young. When you're young, it's easier to get a seat. The seat is marriage or a suitable man. Let's continue.
Basically, you have to be eating paste or chasing butterflies not to get a chair, right? But by the last round of musical chairs, you have a 50% chance of not getting a chair. Mm-hmm. The longer you stay in the game, the greater your chances are of losing.
Did you hear that? The longer you stay on the dating market, uncoupled, unmarried, you have a tougher time of getting a mate. That's the same thing that we've been talking about in these spaces for a while now. Okay? Kevin Samuels used to talk about this all the time. When you get older, talking to a predominantly female audience, right? Once you get older, it's going to be tougher. Now, he's in front of this audience. He has to make sure. I'm not saying that you have to get married when you're young. I'm not saying that everybody wants to get married, which is another thing that men do in these spaces. I think I've done it as well. Okay? Like, hey, I'm not saying, but we do that so we can make sure that the women are still listening. All right? Here we go. So very useful. Let's continue.
And in this way, the dating game is similar.
See?
So just imagine a dating pool that starts out with 40 women and 30 men, which is essentially what's confronting millennials these days. Once half of those women get married, once half of the 40 women get married, the dating pool for the remaining singles becomes 20 women and 10 men.
You see that? And why is that? It's not the fact that there's no suitable men. It's because of the fact that a lot of those men are married. So as I just stated, there are more women with college degrees, but in every racial group, there are more married men than married women. And you know where it's the most pronounced? In the race group where that gap is the most pronounced? You guessed it, the Black community. Even though we are the lowest married, 36% for Black men, 29% for Black women. That 7% gap is the largest gap among all racial groups. Did y'all know that?
In other words, the ratio of women to men goes from 1.3 to 1 at the start of the dating game to 2 to 1 at the midway point. So that, in a nutshell, is why dating feels so much harder for women at 33 than it did at 23. It's not that you're returning his text message an hour too soon or an hour too late. This is a demographic problem. It is not a strategic problem. Now, just to be completely clear, my message is not that women have to get married at 23.
You see?
Or even that anybody has to get married at all. Personally, I don't care whether people prioritize family over career or career over family. My intention is certainly not to scare young women into believing that they can't have it all, that they can't have a career or a fun personal life without jeopardizing some future hope of marital bliss.
See, so he has to be right down there in the middle. Yeah, because that is a typical response from women. So you saying that we need to get married young? Why are you saying that I can't enjoy life, before I get married? So he had to go down the list. It's like a checklist that us men do who are content creators to keep women listening so they won't check out. Even though we know the real thing, we get to the conversation and it's like, hey, it would be in your best bet to try and partner with a man while you're in college. I've said that multiple times on my video, right? Because I'm not a huge supporter of women just going out there in the dating market, running around, because on social media, women don't have diaries anymore. They just have social media. So they just tell all of their, I guess their transgressions and all the stuff that they did in their past. So now it's easy for men to compartmentalize you. We know damn near your sexual history. Women, I forgot which channel. No, it was on Hoodville on Instagram. He said no suitable woman would go on social media to tell social media that they're horny. Y'all remember that trend where women were going on social media telling the world that they were horny? And that's supposed to be somebody's wife in the future. No. So when this was going on, social media was just getting its legs. But now it's far more pronounced. Damn near everybody naked. Even newscasters with platforms, they wearing tight skirts. They're showing themselves half naked, running around and shit. So it's tough, man. Let's continue.
My goal is merely to help people make informed life decisions. So if you're a heterosexual woman who puts a high priority on marriage, and I acknowledge that is not everyone, but if that's you, you should be aware that the marriage math will be more challenging should you decide to put off getting serious about dating until your early 30s.
You see how he circled back? Just like I said, he went back to his overarching point, just to let you know that, hey, this is what you're facing if you continue to wait. It's perfect.
Now, one of my arguments in Datanomics is that the college and post-college hookup culture is largely a byproduct of these lopsided gender ratios. The counter-argument I hear most often from skeptics involves the influence of popular culture or the media. In other words, couldn't it just be the times have changed? Couldn't it be that movies and television and sexually explicit lyrics are what's really behind young people having more sex? Look, I'm not so naive as to believe that pop culture and the media exerts zero influence over our behavior. Those of us like me with teenagers are well aware of how actors and athletes and pop stars can influence the way that our kids talk or dress or even think. The problem I have with blaming the media for the hookup culture is based purely on the data. While college kids may be having more sex than ever, it turns out that high school students are having less sex these days, not more. According to the US Centers for Disease Control, the percentage of teenagers who are sexually active today is lower than it was in 1988, which was the height of the AIDS crisis.
All right, so let me just go ahead and add on to that. For his points, I did do some research to update the information. Still rings true to this day, if you guys didn't know that. Teen sexual activity has declined versus the late 1980s, 1990s. CDC shows ever had sex fell to about 30% in 2021 and remained lower than in the late 1980s, early 1990s. CDC's 2023-2024 trend reports continue to show declines over the past decade, which is why we see a decrease in teen pregnancy. Okay, this is why the CDC's fertility report is shifting from studying or including ages 15 to like 20, because the teen pregnancy rate has dropped so low that it's kind of a nominal number. So to include it wouldn't make sense. So, and I've said this before, in the Black community, once you remove that percentage, 15 to 20, then that's going to look like it increases Black men's fertility rates. Okay, so you remove the lower weights because if you combine them, you average them out, it's going to be lower. All right, but when you remove that, it's going to push Black men's fertility on paper to above, I think it's to 50.1%. Okay, which would mean that the majority of black men have fathered a child. But when the new report comes out, and I'm giving you guys some insight here, especially for the black community, because you know how the black community will take that. See, the majority of black men got kids. No, it's only because they removed the 15 to 20 age groups. When you include the 15 to 20, that number significantly drops to about 42 to 43% due to the fact that teen pregnancies and birth rates are so low, particularly in the black community. I think black women had the lowest decline in their birth rates. It was upwards of like 2.1 or something like that. Maybe even higher if I remember correctly. Okay, so I just wanted to put that out there before the new report comes out. And it says 50.1% of black men have ever fathered a child. And people will run with that. See, it was 46%. Now all these black men, they increased by 5%. No.
Promiscuity, let's just say Hollywood is doing a terrible job. Now, of course, lopsided gender ratios among college graduates would not matter so much if we were all a bit more open-minded about whom we date and eventually marry.
Here we go.
There have been multiple studies on this subject, most recently by Jeremy Greenwood, who's an economist at University of Pennsylvania. And what studies like his have found is a steady decrease in what I call educational intermarriage. In other words, the chances of someone with a college degree marrying somebody without a college degree, those chances are lower today than at any point over the past 50 years. Mm-hmm. My personal suspicion is that online dating makes this worse. Online dating is a bit like choosing options on a new car. You check off various boxes for your ideal mate: height, weight, race, dog person, cat person, oceans, lake, that kind of thing. For the children of the suburbs, nobody ever thinks twice about checking off that box for college graduate. As a result, few college grads ever even see the dating profiles of single people who lack a college degree. A few weeks ago, I actually got a Twitter message from a woman who told me she met her husband after she unchecked the college education box on her online dating site. Now, it's not fair, but for men refusing to consider for men refusing to consider working class women doesn't really cost them anything.
Now, that goes back to the point on how men and women are different in their mate selection. Women who have, and you guys know this, women in on social media, if they have a college degree, they tend to want a man with a college degree. Fair? Is that what we hear? Okay. Men, on the other hand, if they have a college degree, they're not going to exclude women who don't have college degrees. So that means their pool is wider, which is why you have more men who are married than women. And to be fair, I actually understand why women would want a man on their educational and income level, because men are in marriage the protectors and the providers. When men get married, they tend to out-earn their spouses. That's fair. However, in today's climate, if you remove a large pool of men who don't have college degrees, and that is your only marker, understanding that on the majority, every race of men out-earns their female counterpart, then you are doing yourself a disservice. Because I understand it, but it's not logical when you are trying to find a husband, especially if you are trying to find a husband who makes more than you, because you're more willing to find that than you will find a man with a degree. Does that make sense, ladies? Okay, so you can have an education standard, but if you remove that large pool of men who may be out earning you by a significant amount, but the only thing that's holding you back is the fact that he doesn't have a degree, you are doing yourself a disservice. Make sense? Okay.